I'm Alan Maceo, and this is the Live Better, Explore More podcast. I'm here with Morgan Marguiles, the Land Resilient Partnership and Program Coordinator for Daily Acts, a local nonprofit that, according to their website, they are a holistic education nonprofit that takes a heart-centered approach to inspiring transformative actions that create connected, equitable, and climate-resilient communities. We believe in the power of our daily actions to reconnect people to self, community, and place, which helps to heal our society and planet. Welcome to the Live Better, Explore More podcast with your host, Alan Maceo. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's get into your background, you and your background. You're with Daily Acts. We've given you the title. What's your background?
Yeah, so I grew up in the South Yuba River watershed in Nevada City, California. After my time in high school, went to school in New York City at Columbia University, where I studied political science and sustainable development. During my time there, I had the opportunity to learn from some amazing environmental policy experts and got pretty interested in water systems design. After taking a water engineering course, I was becoming pretty fixated on this issue, especially reconciling my place in New York City while being a Californian and knowing the issues that are true and dear to my heart. So focusing on water became a big thing for me. When I made my way back to California, I found Daily Acts through some research that I was doing about rainwater harvesting and ways that we can improve water systems. And I have the immense privilege to be learning from some amazing activists and folks that are taking what I think to be a revolutionary approach to climate resilience, especially in the water world.
Okay. So poli-sci from an Ivy League school, and now you're trying to fix water problems.
Exactly.
There you go. So Daily Acts. So tell me, I've read, you heard the paragraph, right? And there are a lot of people who are going to go, what does that mean?
Right.
So tell us, what does it mean?
Yeah, so Daily Acts believes in the power of small in this quest to create climate resilience. So what is climate resilience? It is the capacity for a community to be able to withstand the effects of climate change. So when we look at the issues that are affecting Petaluma and Sonoma County today, a big issue is drought and fire and flood. So we are, and also we look at things such as carbon sequestration and other components of the climate crisis and how our communities are affected and contribute to it. And what our organization is all about is empowering folks within their communities to be able to take actions that create this sort of climate resilience, while also working at a systems level with government and grassroots organizations. We also are doing educational programs where folks that own homes or rent homes can learn about ways that they can take action in their own gardens and their own landscapes to sequester carbon, to decrease the amount of stormwater pollution, to create a fire-resilient community. Because and then as time has gone on, I'm relatively new to the organization, but learning about the history, but there was once a 350 garden challenge where in one weekend they mobilized 350 people to transform their spaces to create gardens that are producing food, providing shade, and sequestering carbon. And when you look at the effect of a small action, when it is scaled, you can actually see dramatic change. So I think the reason the Daily Acts mission really resonates with me is it's the concept of think global and act local.
Okay, so I think to help drill down a little further, let's look at projects. Okay, so what have you done? What has Daily Acts done in the past Okay, so we're going to talk about the past. We're going to talk what you're doing presently and what future projects do you have coming down. And then I'm ultimately going to get selfish and tie this into two things. One, gray water for my own house. And two, fire hardening, because as a real estate agent in Sonoma County, fire hardening is a real issue. It's an issue for insurance. A person buys their home, they think they're good to go, and the insurance company pulls out on them. So I'm going to try and tie what Daily Acts does and see if there's not some way that this could be a partnership amongst the real estate community and Daily Acts. So let's talk about past projects.
Yeah.
Okay, that you've either been involved in or that you're aware that Daily Acts has done.
Yeah, so Daily Hacks has several programs that work with homeowners and residences, but the programs that I want to talk about just in terms of their past has to do with public spaces. So one amazing landscape transformation that occurred before my time was at the Kavanaugh Center in Petaluma, where about 3,000 square feet of which was once irrigated lawn using so for 1,000 feet of lawn, about 32,000 gallons of water are used annually. That space was transformed into California's first public food forest, which it now includes over 100 different species of plants that are providing food and medicine to the community. It is sequestering carbon by taking carbon from the atmosphere, and the plants are storing it in their roots. The landscape is mulched, which increases the amount of water that is stored within the soil. So these kinds of projects are demonstration gardens where we show that with this plot of land, you can drastically increase climate resilience within a community. You can provide food, shade, medicine, decrease flooding, increase water conservation, and all of these multi-benefits that come from these kinds of projects. So that's the kind of work that the sort of design and install component, that's the kind of work that Daily Acts does that has really inspired me. In addition to monthly education programs where we're talking to folks about how they can reuse their gray water from their laundry machine and send it out to their landscape to irrigate trees, or how they can install rainwater harvesting off of their roof and use that water to supplement their irrigation. So these kinds of educational programs are really about connecting with people and empowering them to make these kinds of changes in their own home. And I think this has a great tie with the real estate industry because folks because real estate especially within Sonoma County, most of the land is private land. If we want to create change and create equitable, resilient communities, it has to happen from the ground up. Homeowners, landowners, renters need to feel empowered to invest in their space to create the kind of communities we want to see, especially in the coming years of climate catastrophes.
Okay, so that's just out of curiosity, what was the cost for the Kavanaugh Center?
Ooh.
Just roughly.
I guess I'm not sure about the cost of the Kavanaugh Center. I know that we did just do a landscape transformation at McKinley School.
Great.
Where it was also 3,000 square feet of turf converted, 8,000 gallons of rainwater harvesting installed, which that project costed, the rainwater harvesting project costed about $60,000 because it included piping all of the rainwater to very far distances to reach trees, etc. But when it comes to sheet mulching a lawn and planting plants, that I think the total amount of material cost for the sheet mulching, the conversion method, was about $2,500, and then the plants were about $5,000.
Okay, so 70,000 plus or minus.
70,000 plus or minus for a whole rainwater harvesting system,
right,
that irrigates that that's pressurized, that irrigates an entire 3,000 square foot native pollinator garden.
Okay. So that's a current one. What future projects do you have coming down the pipe?
Yeah, so thanks for asking.
Unintended.
So coming down the pipe. Yeah, so through the Land Resilience Partnership, we have 70 residential landscape transformations that we will be lining up over the next 2 years. So we're looking to partner with Petaluma residences that are interested in transforming their landscape to demonstrate resiliency and to conserve water and mitigate flooding. 25% of our projects are to be in the disadvantaged community zone within Petaluma, because we want to make sure that these resources are being channeled into communities that have lacked investment prior. And so these projects look like installing a rainwater harvesting tank and hooking it up to an irrigation system. They look like converting a weedy lawn into a pollinator habitat, installing rain gardens, which capture water from the roof and store it in the landscape, by creating a basin where water is channeled and planting water-loving plants that are specialized in absorption, which saturates landscapes, and which I look forward to talking more about when we talk about fire, because I think it's a very helpful tool. So we have a bunch of residential projects lined up, and then through this grant, we will continue to work in schools and parks to plant trees, harvest rainwater, convert turf into pollinator habitat. We have a project lined up at Miwok School and Miwok Park, where we will be converting lawn, installing a rain garden, and installing a rainwater harvesting system.
So you mentioned a grant. I was going to ask you, how are you funded, and specifically on the 70 residential projects that you have? Is that the home, with the exception of the disadvantage? Maybe the others you're going to get funding from the homeowner or the property owner?
Yeah, so the way that the program's working is, so it's a grant from the Department of Water Resources with a specific goal to increase water conservation and decrease flooding. When we are partnering with folks under a certain income level, the total cost of materials, labor, et cetera, is completely subsidized. So it is free to the homeowner. When we're working with folks above a particular income level, we're doing a cost share. So labor is completely covered, but when it comes to materials, we ask for 30 to 50% cost share. So we just did a project at a home that included rainwater harvesting, gray water, and sheet mulching and climate appropriate planting. Oh, and a rain garden. And that project came out at around I think about $8,000, and they qualified as low income, so that cost was covered. So it's this deal. Ultimately, this program is providing an amazing service for the community, because these kinds of projects, through the typical design, build, landscaping, business lens, tend to be quite expensive. So very grateful to the Department of Water Resources and the funding bodies that are making these kinds of solutions scalable, because without it, it wouldn't be scalable and it wouldn't be accessible to the communities that really need them the most.
Great. Okay, so let's tie this into fire hardening. I mean, you mentioned, you and I talked about this, right? The gray water, and I had no idea that a washing machine can shoot water out 100 feet.
Yeah, just about if it's on a level surface,
Right.
The laundry machine has a pump that's built into it, so it can send water out into your landscape. But yeah, so I would love to connect this to fire. So before I go into it, I do want to provide a little bit of context about this relationship between fire and water. Prior to European colonization, there are a few land stewards that took care of this land that worked with fire and water in a way that I think we can learn from. So the indigenous people of this land that we live on, they worked with fire to doing controlled burns and cultural burns to thin the forest so that when fires came through, they were really low intensity. There was less fuels that were there. It wasn't at such a high intensity that it caused the earth to scar over. Now that's interrelated with water because these sort of healthy burns were allowing building soil health, creating a soil sponge within our forests so that when water fell, it was absorbed into the ground. Now in sites where there is a massive high-intensity fire that comes through, water just falls on the landscape and causes erosion and goes into the nearest stream. So I think that's the first point about the relationship between the way that we manage land with fire and manage land with water. And the second point, I know it seems like a diversion, is my favorite animal, the beaver. The beaver is one of the best land stewards of California, as they would take biomass. They would take wood and these fuels that frequently are catching on fire and bring them to streams to create dams. Now, these dams were turning these little streams into massive wetlands where water was being slowed, where water was being encouraged to spread throughout the landscape so that it could sink and create and recharge the aquifer. These areas that have highly saturated soils, when a water comes to that area, or when a fire comes through that area, it doesn't burn. So I think as we start to think about approaching fire resilience on a residential scale, where we are living at the urban wildland interface, it's really important that we learn from the previous land stewards. So yeah, that brings me to wanting to touch on a few of the tools, including gray water, rain gardens, and rainwater harvesting, and how these water practices can enhance fire resilience on our sites.
Okay, so hang on a second. Let's go back to the beaver.
Okay?
Because where here in Sonoma County do we have beavers that are actually building dams?
So the beaver, unfortunately, the beaver populations were wiped out during European settlement. But we've been seeing beavers popping up. There was recently a really awesome CBS short on a beaver that was in a creek in Santa Rosa. But the beavers that we have, I've learned from Brock Dolman at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. He is training a workforce of people to be like the beaver, to go out to streams that have been degraded and to bring biomass into these areas. It's his phrase is / it ain't trash, it's biomass. So that like the wood that are the fuels for our fire, if we can instead move those to our streams, we can saturate soils, and that is an effective land management strategy that replenishes water systems and also creates fire resilience. So there's beavers in all of us humans here, but we want to also restore beaver populations. I think that's very important.
Okay, so 'cause I think people would be interested, right, in going to see. Now, I don't know that they want to drive a long way, but if you're in Sonoma County going to Santa Rosa, it's a pretty easy drive. To sort of be able to go see this in action, right, to see what's been done, I think would be of interest to a lot of people.
Yeah, I would say look into, give a Google search to process-based restoration. There's a lot of really great beaver content and ways to learn from the beaver from that Google search.
Okay, so now that you've laid down the content, let's talk about the fire hardening, the gray water, the rainwater catch, right? So what we see is that no vegetation within, first the state said 5 feet, but they're finding out that that's not really enough, right? So insurance companies are saying, like 10 feet around the house, no vegetation. Okay, so the gray water where you talked about, kind of almost like the pond where you put, plants that really can absorb a lot of water. I don't know that that's necessarily goes against this, but you know how people put Japanese maple trees up against a house, or you know you have that big redwood tree that's pretty close to your house. Things like that, and lawns are another thing. Although they're typically green, right? There is a potential fuel in plants, trees, in the vicinity of the house. So, you know, with that in mind, trying to do what you do, like the gray water, the rainwater catch, is it feasible to set it up, you know, from the roof overhang 10 feet out?
Yes, absolutely. So I agree. When in the interest of fire, leaving a buffer of 5 to 10 feet of plants within the vicinity of the home is very important. There's also a bunch of other guidelines, such as pruning tree canopies so that they're not able to touch, so that fire doesn't spread. Keeping your landscape like the fuel loads low. But so gray water. So about 50 to 70% of the average Californian home, the average Californian home, 50 to 70% of the wastewater is gray water. So this, if by installing, and gray water is water that comes from the laundry machine, the shower, and the bathroom sink. Whereas black water is the water that comes from the toilet and also the kitchen sink, because there's like greases and stuff that can be harmful. So gray water reuse from the laundry does not actually require a permit. It's something that anyone can do with proper guidance. You can send the gray water out to a mulch basin in your landscape where you've dug down, you've piped the water out. The water cannot go above the surface of the landscape, so it's being dispersed below the surface into a mulch basin where these wood chips or whatever form of mulch you're using absorb this water and hold the water. And when you plant plants in the vicinity around, their roots come and find them. So it's a really great way to passively irrigate fruit trees and other perennials on your landscape. But how this relates to fire is that if you're doing a lot of laundry and you design a system where you send out the gray water to the buffer strip around your property, maybe your backyard. You live on the urban wildland interface. In your backyard, there's a big forest, and that's your biggest threat for fire. If you can find a way to send your gray water to the backyard and around the perimeter of your property, irrigating plants and saturating that soil, you're creating a hydrated buffer strip where fire is not going to want to cross that because it is wet. Even in the summer years, if you're still doing laundry, that soil there is saturated. So that's one way that we can be reusing our gray water on site to create these hydrated buffer strips that prevent fire from entering your landscape. I had the privilege and opportunity to go to Rush Creek Lodge in near Yosemite Valley, where they're actually doing this with black water, and gray water. All of the water on site is being reused in the landscape, but they have a black water system that goes through multiple phases of where the organic matter settles, and the water eventually gets dispersed into the landscape. And it's particularly on the hillside where, if there was a fire, where fire would come to the property. And they've found that these kinds of hydrated buffer strips are extremely effective at preventing wildfires from entering the area. And I took a tour out there, and it was all so green and beautiful and obviously like very saturated, like sort of wetland, like a constructed wetland that operates as a buffer so that fire can't enter the property.
So I'm looking for a range, and I'm probably asking a question that you're going to hate to guess at, and maybe it's not a guess, but because I know it'll depend on the type of house. 2-story, where's the wash machine at, right?
Yeah.
Is there a range though where you say just gray water, just really you're only getting the gray water from the wash machine, right? Because it's hard to figure out how to get the water out of your shower, or is it?
So the shower it's a slightly more complicated system because it requires that you cut into the plumbing, but it is legal in California with a permit. So you just have to apply for a permit, maybe consult a plumber. But it's not, if you have access to your crawl space, if you don't live on a slab, then that's also it's like not that difficult with a little bit of consultation. So shower water is free to use in your landscape as well.
Okay. So roughly non-permit, so let's just stay with the wash machine because it doesn't require a permit.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a range like, hey, that's going to cost between, I'm making it up, 1,000 and 3,000, or it's greater?
If you're doing it yourself, I say 100 to 300.
Yeah, but then, that's for most of us, that means we're going to be calling in the plumber. So now we're going to triple the cost because we've, destroyed the house trying to do it ourselves.
Right.
So if we have somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, if you're hiring someone, I've heard of quotes reaching $5,000, but I think that you could also go there's folks that will probably install a system for $3,000. But doing it, Daily Axe has access to a lot of DIY, do-it-yourself gray water install guides, and if you're willing to make a project out of a day and have some familiarity with working with PVC, then you can go to our website and we have all of the materials there that you need to buy. The most expensive part is a 3-way brass valve, which gets nailed up to your wall, and it just allows you so that whenever you are washing something that's really dirty, and like maybe you're washing a diaper and you don't want to send it to your landscape, you can turn it so then it goes to your sewer. And then when it's more clean, you can turn this brass valve so that it goes to your landscape. So that feature is always available. And that's like a $65 part, but everything else is just pipe and valves. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then to do the permitted ones, I'm not even sure what the permit cost would be, but aside from that, if you were trying to, I guess the shower would be really, if you can get to the crawl space, right?
Yeah.
Is that another one that's about just a shower, right? One shower, about 3,000?
Probably similarly. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I think, I haven't done this on a contractor level because I'm working through the nonprofit, but I think like $3,000 to $5,000 for a shower system makes sense if you're contracting it out. Yeah.
Okay. What innovative ideas do you see coming down? Not that gray water system, that's pretty cool, right? The rainwater catch, I think probably for me personally, I don't really want the tank sitting out there, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on rainwater harvesting, and so the tanks that we're talking about, that is what we call active rainwater harvesting, where you take water that's coming off the roof and you store it in a tank, which I know that there's a stigma. Folks don't really want to have the tank in their landscape, but when it comes to fire resilience, having water on property is amazing and massive, like a massive benefit, because I think that there could even possibly be requirements in the future that there's amount of water stored on site to fight fires. So the active rainwater harvesting, it's sort of a clear line to how that benefits water resilience. But then rain gardens, which is something I touched on earlier, are when you dig a basin in the landscape and direct water to this area, and you amend the soil with compost, and you plant water absorptive plants. This is what we call passive rainwater harvesting, where water that is flowing on the landscape, if you can encourage it to enter this basin and where it will pond for a moment and then eventually seep into the landscape, that is another way of creating an artificial wetland in your home, because instead of this water that, and it is a way of learning from the beavers. So the concept of slow it, spread it, sink it, store it is that's what the rain garden does. It's about taking that water that is instead rushing off your landscape and slowing it and storing it in the ground, and that is saturating your soil, and also stopping runoff that is going towards a creek, bringing pollution, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that rain gardens and this sort of, it's called earthworks, where you're working with, if you live on a hill, for example, you can create what they call on-contour swales. So swales that are perpendicular to the slope of the hill, where you're digging that swale, you're building a basin or a berm on the other side, so that when water comes down, it has a chance to like sort of settle. It's sort of like a speed bump, like a water speed bump. It has a chance to settle in that area, percolate into the ground table. And this is a really innovative and amazing tool that I've been watching just videos on YouTube, seeing I looked up greening the desert. Folks that live in areas with not a lot of rain that do these kinds of earthwork rainwater harvesting strategies that have built oases that are green and flourishing even in low water years. So I think that earthworks and passive rainwater harvesting is a really innovative way of rehydrating the earth. And, as I touched on, by rehydrating the earth, we're also creating fire resilience. Right. Water and fire interrelated. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. I think that's a really awesome, innovative concept. And there's a few more.
Go.
Coming through the California Native Plant Society sponsored a bill called AB 1573 that just passed the State Assembly that requires commercial properties with landscapes to adopt native pollinator planting instead of lawns. So I think that so it's 25% of the landscape by 2026 must be California native plants, and 75% by 2035 must be California native plants. This shows a general trend happening within California of moving away from lawns and towards native pollinator plantings, which benefits water conservation and biodiversity, and is I think a really strong case to make to folks in the real estate business that and folks that are just like in the landscaping business as well, that lawns are out, native gardens are in, and I think that is also I think that living within Sonoma County, where there's this big movement of permaculture, permaculture is a method of creating regenerative and socially just systems that are based on natural patterns and natural processes, learning from those natural processes, such as learning from the beaver to rehydrate the land in your own property. That I see that is being embraced at a lot of levels in terms of how we are utilizing the resources that we're realizing are not as abundant given the way that we've managed it, and realizing that the way we manage resources determines whether it's abundance or scarcity, and that water in California is an abundant resource. It's just the way that we manage it has created the scarcity. So I think I see a general trend towards looking to nature, learning from nature for how we can manage our resources and live in harmony with the planet. So those are, and then I guess some more innovation that's happening is just applying these principles to throughout in multi-sector. So we're talking about, I know that we're here talking about like residences, but
Right.
applying these practices for forestry, to rangeland, to agriculture, to urban areas, to suburban areas, that we have to see that all of these lands are interconnected, that farmers are embracing best management practices with water, that foresters, loggers are learning how to go about that industry in a way that is benefiting the forest, not destroying ecosystems and increasing erosion. So just applying these principles of permaculture and regeneration, learning from ecosystems, multi-sector, is something that I've noticed through like my research and my work that is really, really exciting. Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, whether it's a commercial property owner or an individual residential owner, to get more information on any of the topic, the gray water, the rainwater, to talk about the beaver, right, and how that can apply to their property, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can contact me at morgan@dailyacts.org, or my phone number is 530-687-2560. I'm pretty jazzed about all these things and would love to support you in your journey to becoming more climate resilient within your own space.
And last thing, I know you touched on the Kavanaugh Center and you touched on McKinley School. Are those projects done and people can go by those two locations and see the work?
Yeah, McKinley School is sort of behind a gate, but Kavanaugh Center and then also the Petaluma Library on the back side of the library, that is another site where we converted lawn into a pollinator garden, and then also City Hall at Petaluma. Those are the three main Daily Acts demonstration gardens that folks could swing by, check it out, harvest fruit. The pomegranates right now, if you're listening to this when it's recorded in fall, pomegranates are going off, and these are public sites. There was an elderberry tree that was blooming, or like was fruiting, I think just a few months ago, and I was there connecting with some community members that were there harvesting the elderberry to create their own elderberry syrup. And these are public sites where folks can harvest food, and these are all available to go check out when you have
Very
a
good.
chance.
Give us your number again.
530-687-2560.
Perfect. Morgan, thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
There you go.